welcome again to The Actor's Vow. This is Denise Boratrapat. If this is the first time you're listening to the podcast, welcome, and you came in such a good episode. And if you are back, thank you for coming back, and you're in for a treat. I'm so excited for you to hear this one. But before we get to the episode today, I want to announce the Sunday spotlight of this week. Her name is Maya Tanaka Award, and she is actually from Japan, yay, international artist, and she lives in San Francisco now. She is actually starting college. She's a very, very young artist, but she comes from a family of performers. Her parents are musicians, and when she was little, she toured as a pro concert pianist, and she even played at Carnegie Hall, which is incredible. She's going to be telling us about her experience and her future goals and so many more amazing things this Sunday. You'll be able to read her full interview. But if you want to see what Maya is about before this Sunday, you can reach her at her Instagram at Mayaki_Tanaka. That's at MAYAKI_TANAKA. So let's get to this week's episode with our special guest. This week's guest is James Ortiz. He is a director, scenic and puppet designer, performer, writer. You know, putting a label to James, I feel like it's undermining everything he can do, because he really does so many artistic things and he does them amazingly. He's done many things, but he's most known for The Woodsman, which opened off-Broadway, and I saw it when I was in New York City, my sophomore year of college, which we talk about in the interview, and that's how we got to know each other and got in contact. And he won an award for that, an Obie Award for puppet design. That was in 2016. And most recently, he's done Hercules in Central Park, which was produced by Disney. And some other of his credits include the Public Theater, Yo Rep, Carnegie Mellon University. Basically, he's done really incredible things. James is so talented, and you can actually see it because The Woodsman was recorded. And it's currently available for streaming on Amazon Prime and Broadway HD. So if you haven't seen it, I truly recommend it. It's a very different show. I know you will love it. It will change your perspective, and it's really worth the time. I really don't want to make this intro longer. James and I had a lot of things to talk about, so I'm going to let you hear it. So let's welcome James Ortiz to The Actor's Vow. All right, welcome, James, to The Actor's Vow. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Hi, Denise. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So the first question I wanted to ask you is, what made you want to be an actor?
Oh my gosh, just an easy one, right?
Right.
Starting off easy. What made me want to find my way into that? I mean, it sort of is all tied into like my relationship with puppetry. And a little bit of all the things that I kind of do. I mean, I definitely was the sort of very introverted painting, sculpting, drawing, elementary school person. Very introverted, very sort of that way. And then I found my way into sort of theater and acting, and it just got me out of my shell. Mm-hmm. And then sort of shortly after that, I found my way into puppetry, and puppetry was this Venn diagram of both things. Like there was something really dynamic and exciting to me about, like, I didn't have to start with just me. I could actually like decide. It's character analysis to the max, right? Yeah. Like you can decide beyond like the color of their eyes, but like their fingernails and like all these like strange details that are actually really satisfying. Mm-hmm. But I think the thing that really got me into acting was like, there was always movies on in the house growing up, and there was always storytelling. My mother's an English teacher. So I think these days I think I mostly identify as a director and a designer who sometimes acts if someone needs me to. Okay. I try not to act every day in all my production meetings. But I think I identify as that, which mostly just means that I have always been sort of mostly drawn to being a piece of a big story. I was always really excited about like finding a story that's exciting to me and trying to be a part of it. And I think that, again, that has to come from my English teacher mother, and like, dissecting like Dr. Seuss books at it from a young age and going like, but where's the climax? And going like, this is so nerdy, But I think it's that.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like so many of us can identify with what you said, that being an introvert and theater did that for you,
Mm-hmm.
like being able to get out. I think so many actors started that way, like myself included. So,
Totally.
yeah, for
Oh my
sure.
gosh.
Yeah.
100%.
And the puppetry part and the prosthetics and makeup, everything you do, how did that
Yeah.
come into play?
It's so hard to sort of track. I mean, I think it was just because I had an interest in making things. I
Mm.
still do, but I think I was always sort of more interested in like how the sausage was made. I,
Okay.
during the late '90s, early 2000s, when every DVD had 5 hours of documentaries on it, was like the most thrilling time
Yeah.
for me because I could go like, oh, that was just tinfoil glued to the wall, or like I could find out the how it was done,
Mm.
and also like find out the how of storytelling and find out the how of this and that, and since theater is so much about process,
Yeah.
we're in that room for a month if not more, just trying to like find a way to tell that 2 hour story.
Yeah.
um, so there's something really fulfilling to me about like what are all the steps to get to the thing. um,
Cool. Did you do that,
so I
as
think
a
that's probably why.
child or like as a teenager? Like, did you start building things
when,
already?
when did when did that sort of begin really?
Yeah.
I think, I mean, even from like one of the first movies I remember even seeing was The Wizard of Oz,
Okay.
growing up.
Mhm.
And I definitely like, kept turning to my mom and dad and going like, how did she melt? Like they would
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
And they would go, I mean, I think it's like this, and there's a hole in the floor, and she go, and it's like, got it. It just would be, I would just be fascinated by, um, you know, magic tricks, which is effectively, in a lot of
Mhm.
ways, what puppetry is.
Yeah.
You sort of think that it's mostly just about like manipulating a thing for it to breathe, but so much of the things that really make it work is like the organization of like which of the five people operating the one character has to do this weird acrobatic thing that you're not even noticing, so
Right.
that this thing can look like it's doing the right thing. Um, so I think it probably just started when I was very young, and it was a very crafty household. There was always crafts going on. There was
Mhm.
always like paintings happening and sculptures happening, and yeah, I think it just sort of found me that way.
That's
And
awesome.
then I went to an acting school and I focused on like, no, I think I'm gonna like just really go for this and really do this. And it was like 4 years of Chekhov at SUNY, not 4 years of actual Chekhov, but it felt like that. Um, Chekhov and Shakespeare and Ibsen and
Yeah.
at SUNY Purchase, and then I graduated, and the sort of the first thing that I got after graduating was puppeteering for this puppet opera in Manhattan,
Mm.
because somebody remembered that years before I had done this puppet thing, and
In
it was just
school?
like,
You
and
did that in school too?
yeah, I mean, oh God, I guess we're getting into the bio. Here it is. Um, but uh, I went to a community college in Texas. My family lives in Texas,
Oh, okay.
and called Collin County. Really incredible school, great theater program, and puppetry was just again a fascination that I sort of had, sort of mostly just like a detailed hobby, I guess is the best
Mm.
way I could put it, a hobby, a committed hobby, and I was about. I had just gotten accepted to go to the conservatory at SUNY Purchase in New York, and one of my professors said, "Well, hey, before you leave, we have to do something with puppets." And I went, "What are you thinking about?" And they said, "Let's do the Rocky Horror Puppet Show." And
Oh,
I was like, 19 or something, and had never seen that movie. I didn't know anything about it, so I definitely was like, okay. But it was the first time that I had done large scale puppetry, um, and tried to find a way for puppetry to not feel like it's only a special effect inside of a piece of
yeah.
storytelling.
Yeah.
Because so many times it is that, and that's great. I mean, it's a spectacle, but even then, I was really interested in sort of, this is the CGI of theater. Like it can do anything.
Right.
So why? What? Anyway, long story short. And then that was the thing that kind of, when I went to SUNY Purchase and I graduated, some of the people from that school in Texas had migrated to New York as well. And, it's a town of 5 people, really. Um, so one thing led to another, and then I started this sort of strange career that involves a lot of hyphens.
Right. Yeah, it's very specific. I was looking at it. I'm like, there's no way someone just wakes up and they're like, I'm gonna do puppets and prosthetics. So
Yeah,
I needed
I
to know
don't
the
know if I could have.
story. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad.
So I want to know
Super
what
weird.
you, yeah, and the your designs, like they really have a style and they are very spooky and dark, and I love that. But I want to know,
Cool.
what are your inspirations? Because it seems like a lot of them are villains or monsters. So
Oh, sure. Well, lately, I mean, if you're talking about my quarantine has turned into like a lot of time off for a lot of artists and actors in all over the world. But it just sort of manifested in like, well, why can't today be Halloween? So I just sort of, I just
okay.
started going like, why can't I just like be every Batman supervillain I ever thought of being? So my Instagram is a little overfilled with like, this is a lot, James.
Okay.
Um, but now I don't remember the question that you asked me, so it's all gone
What's
now.
your biggest inspirations for both puppets and your
Oh,
prosthetics?
yeah. I mean, I think what a good question. I think it depends on the project. I hate to say that because it's sort
Okay.
of, of course I was very moved by Jim Henson's work when I was very young, and I was very drawn to the puppetry of Philip Huber and Julie Taymor, and a lot of like, and then sort of like the off Broadway puppet artists that do a lot of really exciting work. Basil Twist is a name that rings out. Michael Curry, and these are all sort of people that have just sort of found their way making this sort of stuff. But I think I am such a little story monster that I sort of I can become a little difficult because I'm sort of going, no, this story is about these five ideas, so the design has to reflect those ideas.
Okay.
So sometimes I do sort of like slap my own hand and go like, that would be cool, but it doesn't belong
Hmm.
in the thing that we're trying to make. So I guess it's hard to say. I mean, everything that the periods when I'm making work,
Uh-huh.
when I'm making my own work or I'm working for another person's project, when it's the early days and when it's just inspiration and taking in information. I worked on Hercules for Disney in the park
Hmm.
last year, and it was really exciting because I was expecting. I mean, they brought me in to like work on the Titans and the monsters and the things that
Yeah.
Hercules
Yeah,
fights,
I saw them. They
and
were
it was.
so cool.
Did
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. Well, I
It
saw
was
the
really
pictures.
exciting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was really cool. And I was also really excited to find out that Disney was so unprecious about their original designs. They sort of said, whatever, it has to fit this play.
Hmm, okay.
Um, and knowing how big that theater is and how it's such a enormous stage that the work you have to do is kind of has to be very colorful and very bold and very
Yeah.
big, which belongs perfectly inside of this Disney
Yeah. It's
jazz riff
Disney. It's
on
for kids. Yeah.
Hercules.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was really fun. And I did a lot of research on like deep sea fish for the Hydra and this and that, and like trying to find like, but there's a poisonous tree frogs I was looking at. So, I mean, the inspiration is always like, it's a bizarre and big and wide spectrum. For the Woodsman, it was a whole other variety of things that I was pulling from. But, I love the research part. I think that's, since I am ultimately, I am someone that has the brain synapses of an actor who has
Hmm.
found his way into design. It means that like the actorly like research period
Right.
of like you've been handed the role and you go, cool, I want to know as much as I can about everything so
Yeah.
that I can do this thing. I still love that. So I
Yeah,
still
that's
do
my
that.
favorite part about acting too. Yeah, all that
Is
those
it really?
months of research. Oh, I love it. Reading
Oh
books,
my
finding
gosh.
new things. Yes.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Love it. Yeah.
I think it's the weird like Hermione Granger in me that just like
Yeah.
wants to know more about it, you know?
Yeah. That's cool. So I want to know, you said you do your research, and then I'm guessing you do some sketches. Like, how do you get from that
What's
in
the
your
process?
mind, yeah, to the actual
Yeah.
puppet?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. It definitely has changed depending on the project because oftentimes you have to kind of start with the practicals, which is
Yeah.
such a bummer to talk about, but it is true that you kind of have to go like the budget is this and the amount of time I have to build it is this.
Yeah.
And oftentimes I'm lucky enough that I can team up with a prop shop of a theater that already exists. And I'm mostly like there for a short period of time training the prop department who may or may not have any relationship with puppetry,
Hmm.
how to build for this. So I mean, it starts with all that stuff, and you kind of go, and then oftentimes the design is affected by that information.
Right.
Do I only have 4 pairs of hands over 3 days to make? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A lot of that, nuts and bolts. But I think the way that I found that is the most useful for me, I started when I was very young. I would draw and paint, and that was my medium. That was my way in.
Okay.
And as I found my way into puppetry, I started sculpting a lot more. So it's actually easier for me now at the age that I'm at to sculpt something quickly than it is to draw. Like the drawing muscle is not as strong anymore,
Like
which
with
is
clay?
odd. Yeah.
Cool.
So it becomes a thing of like, especially if I'm making a big puppet and I need to explain it to a team of people that are going to be building it with me, or if I'm working under another director who, wants to see the tangible idea of it. I do find that it's easier to show a 3-dimensional to a build team or a director than it is a couple of sketches. But I will start with sketches if I need to. But oftentimes I'll buy a bunch of like those little wooden art dolls you see in Michael's and craft stores, those little posable. And if the budget's really low, I'll buy a bunch of action figures and I'll stack them up how the puppeteers are going to be, and I'll build a sculpture of the puppet on top of those action figures. So where the puppeteers would be, sort of, and it's great for me because, it's great for me because it's like sort of my first few rough drafts that I can play with, where I can kind of go like, oh, well, the joint will probably have to be that, and that if a person's going to be angled around that way, blah, blah, blah.
That makes sense. I hadn't thought about that part. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. How the puppeteer is going to be placed. Yeah.
Well, it's that funny thing because you want the puppeteers to vanish ultimately, but you kind of have to start from them. But it's interesting and it's always really fun. And, I was working on an adaptation of Dracula for maybe 2 years ago. And I had a sketchbook that was just, it was just black ink kind of stuff that I was using to get ideas down. And then I did this opera of Beauty and the Beast a couple of years ago. And the only way I could get the ideas down was watercolor. So I think there's something of like, there is something tangible about those things that help affect. It's just a different variation of the brain research,
Yeah.
I have a friend that loves doing actor journal. She's an actress and she loves making her character journal.
Yeah.
Do you do that?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll forward you. She posted it a couple of weeks ago. She played my mother in The Woodsman.
Oh, okay.
And she made this gorgeous sort of like little Oz Bible for herself to hang on to that was full of research and like pressed leaves and flowers and notes and details and all these things that, of course, an audience is not necessarily there to.
Yeah, they don't see that part. Yeah.
But you feel it when it's not there.
Yeah.
I heard this detail. I heard this sentence a long time ago, and it helps me when I'm working, which is that detail is like seasoning on a really delicious dish. Mm-hmm. You only notice it when it's not there.
Yeah.
So it makes me go like, okay, I guess I have to work harder. Anyway.
Absolutely. Always.
I'm sorry, I'm rambling. You have so many questions.
No. Don't worry. That's all interesting. So I really want to talk about The Woodsman because I saw it.
Cool.
I think it was 4 years ago off Broadway. It was sophomore year for me. I was living in New York City and I went to see it with a friend. And I was blown away, especially because at that time I was learning about a technique called alba emoting. I don't know if you've heard about it.
I don't think I've heard of it either. What's it called again?
Like alba emoting.
No, I don't know it.
So it's like an acting technique. Well, they also use it in psychology and therapy and things like that. But it's basically to evoke an emotion through breath. So, instead of like going back to like your past in your mind, if you want to be angry, there's a way of breathing that will bring you there.
Sure.
So your show reminded me of that so much. And I was like, whoa, that's so
cool.
Yeah. And I was wondering if you knew. Yeah. So I wanted to know what your inspiration for that was and like where the breathing and all that came from.
Yeah. I mean, so I assume you saw it at New World Stages. Is that where you saw? Yeah. Okay. So that was the last production we had. And that's the same one that got on video. That's on Broadway HD. But that show, we did it, I believe we did it 5 times we did 5 different productions of it in like a 3-year, 4-year span, which is crazy. It was always a very short run, workshops and development. But the first sort of in order to answer your question, I kind of have to give you a little bio on how the play happened.
Yeah, of course.
Which is that we had a little theater company and we were trying to raise money to put on a show, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners are aware of the necessity of that. And the best thing we could come up with was going, what if we threw a party, and during the party we unveil a new work that is something for the pipeline, down the pipeline later. And I was like, I have this crazy idea. What if it was this adaptation of this Tin Man story from the first Oz book? I just want to adapt this first little paragraph where we talk about his life. And the only idea I had is that I knew that I wanted an actor to become a puppet. And that was basically it. We had about 3 weeks to get the whole thing together. The budget was like $200-300 max. There was nothing.
Okay.
I made the Tin Man, I made the witch, and we just basically were like, it was a lot like, the train's coming and you're laying the tracks at the same time. You're supposed to kind of going, there's a show at this point, so let's figure it out. And I brought all the sort of friends that I had that knew that I knew would approach this with sensitivity and were just good game team players. And we just sort of attacked the thing. And as you can imagine, early rehearsals were all about puppetry and me sort of teaching people. I brought in an early version of The Witch, and we kind of talked about how we work together. And a big part of puppetry is the breath work. Basically, and not to get too like far into the inside baseball of it, but a big part of it is, especially when there's more than one person operating one puppet, it's the breath is what communicates between the two puppeteers or three puppeteers or four puppeteers. Okay. Basically, I like to start from a place of the puppeteer is an actor and they should work improvisationally in the rehearsal room as much as they want until we kind of hone the thing, like rehearsal, like normal rehearsal. I don't like to walk into a process, me being the choreographer of the puppetry, because I actually think it doesn't really land the same way for me. So we start from a place of improvisation where the two puppeteers know physically how to work the thing, but then we give them the tool of the inhale, because you're always sort of breathing together as one as much as you can. It's a louder sort of Lamaze class breath. And it's fuller so that you can hear each other. And generally the inhale is a cue to your fellow puppeteer that I'm about to do something, and the exhale is that action. So basically we started working on puppetry that way, and then it just kind of became the rhythm of the rehearsal room, that we were kind of doing little moments in the show and going and like starting a scene or walking out of a scene or doing, moments where we had to really be synced up together, of like the axe is trying to chop my head off. You can imagine there's a lot of like cueing each other in a way that we wouldn't immediately clock. So I think like 3 productions in, we just sort of realized that was the communicative style of how we technically need to work. But also the second you hear somebody go, it's just emotional, and it just lands. So I think we took advantage of that, but mostly it was, as always, sort of practical, that turned into a choice that we all kind of got behind and felt like it was the right one, I think.
Yeah, wow. I just never thought about it being a cue, it's like stage combat, cue and then go. That I had no idea.
Well, it's so useful to also like, you're never sort of like scoring the breath. You're never sort of cue, like it's never music. I think it can sound like that to an audience, but it's never that specific. But also just reminding actors to breathe is vital, because like you will pass out if you're feeling that much and not letting anything in or out. So literally, like, and also just given the fact that it was such a physical show, you just need to breathe. So it became really useful, and it became a really helpful way to sync up the witch characters together and all the puppets together. And whole moments are just people going and then we all look, because we just heard that, and that's all we needed.
Once the show was done, was there still some room for improv, or it was always
at that point? I mean, at that point we were, I believe we were fully equity at that point, because as you can imagine, we did so many versions of it that were like equity showcase and not quite a showcase, and all the different like stages in between at that point. And we had a really incredible equity couple of stage managers on that last one, and if it's not clear from the show itself, everybody in that room was very involved in the creation of that show. It's very, yes, there are shapes, there are steps that would be the lines, like that was the scripted line, is like the move that has to communicate this, but it would be like, this is the idea of the move, how do you want to say that line? And at a certain point, it kind of got to a place where stage management was like, the show is locked, we have to stop evolving. I mean, we were like moving into like our previews had ended, and we were still like, it's actually this, it's actually that.
Right.
And we were told to stop, so we did. But I think it's because, the guy who played my father is a movement. He has a clown and Lecoq background. The co-director that I was working with has a bunch of movement history. The actress who played Nimi, she comes from a family of dance. So like everybody had a movement background, but then everybody else was just sort of actors that just got into it. So I think that infectious energy of like making never wanted to stop. So it became that thing of going, like, let's simplify.
Wow. Okay. So I also want to know about the process, because, you see it off Broadway and it's there and it's beautiful, but I know you brought it there from the beginning. So what were the big challenges that you encountered?
Oh gosh.
Like how many years did it take to?
Yeah, I mean, it really took about 3.5 years. I want to say 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
And again, we were, so the first time we did it was that sort of fundraising workshop. It was a 2-night only thing. The show was very different from the show that you would have seen, or the one that's on Broadway HD. It's the same idea, but it's a different show. Excuse me. And, the goal of that was just to make something to watch while people were like, at a party. And then when I finished that, a lot of people kept like grabbing me by the shoulders and going, you must keep working on this. And I went, I don't know. It's like such a strange story. And do people even care about this? And people were like really encouraging of me.
Yeah.
I was lucky that the material worked and the show worked, because that drew other interested parties to us.
Yeah.
I was fortunate that several people in my friends group wanted to be producers. They didn't want to be actors. They wanted to produce. They wanted to put the shows on. They wanted to make work.
Wow.
And they wanted to be creative producers. So, like everything that has to do with being an actor or performer or creator, it has to do with sort of luck and patience and energy and just always doing good work, just trying to make good work that you're proud of.
Yeah.
And I think the challenges were actually, there was never really any major challenges in the making of it. That was always the delight. I mean, the fact that like the best part of the process was kind of getting in the room with everybody and going, okay, this scene, these 12 things have to happen. I have no idea what order they're going to happen in. I have no idea about any of it, but we know that in order for the next moment to work, we have to land these 5 ideas or whatever.
Okay.
And that was delicious. Like that was the best part. I hate to sound as pampered as I was, but I was surrounded by some really smart, really great people who really just took on the like producerial conversations and would bring me in, because I mean, the show there's so much of me all over it. When we would talk about advertising and talk about trying to get it seen and trying to get it noticed, and there was a lot of that. I had a lot of plate spinning just making the show happen, because I was designing it and co-directing it and set designing and puppet building, and there was like too many things happening.
Yeah.
So it became a thing of going, puppeteers are controlling people, and I am a controlling person, but it became about like giving some of that over to people I could trust. But I really can't think of any major challenges. I mean, oftentimes we were just trying to, sync up the idea with the music, with the thing in the time that we had.
Right.
But that was the best part. So it's hard to say.
No, that's amazing. I mean, the fact that you say there are not that many challenges, but still it took almost 4 years. So it's great to hear, because so many times we see the finished product and we want to do that. It's like, I have this idea and I want it to be done now this way, like it was finished, but it's a process.
Oh my gosh. It's a huge process. And the fact that like that every time that we would get an opportunity to do it again. So we did it for this fundraiser. Then we did it at Ars Nova. Ars Nova was doing the Ants Fest, which if you don't know anything about it, or if your listeners don't, it's amazing. But it's I think it's still a thing that's happening when theater is back.
Right.
But it's effectively it's a festival for, I think, like 60 days, but every day it's a new show. So you load in that day, you do the show, you leave that night. And it's just this wide spectrum of everything. And they do a lot of wacky off-Broadway stuff, really powerful, really cool stuff. So we had an opportunity to do it there. So we built a rehearsal process beforehand. And even, the second that a show closes is the moment that you realize the things that should be different about it.
Yeah.
As you can attest. So definitely I was filling up journals, and I was also just trying to check in with as many of the other creatives and just the people I was building the show with, and going, I think in order for this moment to land, we actually have to scrap this and redefine, the character of Nimi, the love interest, changed so much over the course of the creation of the project. And the character of Nick changed so much over the course of the project. And we had these sort of pieces, and we're just trying to find a way for them to belong, which I guess is sort of the story of the show. Yeah, it was definitely like this very, circuitous and winding back and forward and taking in new inspiration. There was a whole version of the show, because I had just reacquainted myself with It's a Wonderful Life. I hadn't seen it in so long, and I had forgotten it completely. And it's such a wonderful movie, but I was going, oh, actually, in order to make Nick make sense, he has to be a little more George Bailey, in that he has big dreams for his future, but he gets sidetracked by life. And we started kind of jiving on that idea, and all of a sudden the parent scene made a lot more sense, and the whole anyway, I can ramble on for days. That was basically that.
Yeah, of course, with so many years, the play also like evolves with you, the way you evolve too.
100%.
So, yeah,
100%.
So I want to talk more about now your prosthetics and your makeup. I mean,
cool.
I want to know, if I think to myself now, I want to do a robot, I wouldn't even know where to start. And you have so many cool ones. I saw that you made one, the Scarecrow. That's one of my favorite ones.
Yeah.
And you said you made it for like $6.
It's very scary.
What? Like, you need to explain that.
Yeah, it was really cheap. I mean, I also am somebody that, as I mentioned, I do a lot of miniature sculptures of the puppets I'm going to build. So that did manifest in that. I'm in a small apartment in Astoria. I love it here. It's really cozy. But there's always was a weird tiny room in this house that, like, it's too big for a closet, but not good enough for storage. Like, it was a weird extra room that at a certain point it was like, this is going to be my at-home workshop.
Oh, your studio,
so I can do a lot of exactly. So I definitely had, at the beginning of quarantine, I had a pretty full stock of like clay and paint and latex and fabrics and all the things that I would use for mocking things up, or like building small puppets for different projects. So basically my quarantine was just kind of like, it was sort of a fancy way of getting through, like clearing out my studio.
Yeah.
But the Scarecrow, I already had a plaster bust of my head, and a makeup artist friend of mine made one for me. So I had that to build off of. And there's some really simple, I mean, everything I'm doing is stuff that you can do at home. It's all sort of like old style, like universal monsters, like it's cotton and latex, and sometimes I'm mixing latex and flour and making a paste. But the Scarecrow was really fun because it was basically, I bought cheesecloth for $6, and I already had built up with latex on my plaster, like the skull, scully cheekbones and eye sockets and this and that. And then I basically just dunked the cheesecloth in liquid latex and started mashing it around until it dried. It was basically that. And then the rest of it was like painting and detail. But it's amazing because, you sort of think of movie makeup and this and that as being quite complex and difficult. And it is the stuff you see on camera in real movies is, silicones and materials that are like sometimes hard to get your hands on. But if you're trying to like do a fun Halloween on a budget, cotton and latex, and Rick Baker, this amazing makeup artist, he's the reason that there's a makeup Oscar at all. He did the werewolf in American Werewolf in London in the 70s and the Men in Black aliens. He's an incredible artist. But he has a YouTube channel that I'm always inspired by, and he shows how to make a prosthetic, building it off of a plaster cast of your face, or even just directly on your face, and how quickly and easily you can do it. And I've been using all of his techniques. There's also a YouTube channel, I'm going to say it wrong, I think it's called Max. It's just these people who just like make monsters every day, and they do this whole thing of putting flour inside of latex until it's this gooey paste, and you slap it onto a thing, and then you can sculpt it as it's drying, and it's lightweight and it's flexible. Anyway, this is so specific, but yeah,
no, that's awesome.
It's totally doable.
And how long does it take you? Like, what's the longest costume that it's taken you?
I think I did Apocalypse from X-Men a couple weeks ago. Sort of this like evil, sinister, like blue-lipped monster guy. And I had most of those materials already sitting at home, but that one, because I decided like an idiot that I wanted it to be like very inspired by this artist who designed alien tech stuff in the 70s. His work is very, very detailed, so the amount of detail just meant that I was going to be working on it for a while. So I think I was working on that costume and that makeup for about a month. It was a fun month. But the Scarecrow, I mean, that took me like 3 days, because it was just like bam, 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 bam. And the fun thing about making scary, ugly things is that you don't have to worry about symmetry. You don't have to worry about like making the details perfect. It's supposed to be scary. So that's really the fun of it, I think. And doing scary things means that you can get it done quickly, because it's like, I don't know what the rules are. Put an eyeball on your forehead, done. Call it done,
That's awesome. So until now, you've only done this for theater, I'm guessing. Have you done film and TV?
Done makeup stuff?
Yeah, or like prosthetics or added puppetry.
I've definitely been approached by a lot of like filmmaker friends that kind of go like, I really want to do like an alien movie with a puppet monster. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And sometimes those things happen and sometimes they don't, just because it's hard to get anything done. I did a couple NYU student films when I first started, first graduated, and I did a couple creature makeups. And again, it was all sort of very simple techniques that were low budget and really doable. And it's like, using these low budget materials, but just kind of finessing it a little bit so you don't know how cheap it is. But no, I mean, I've been fortunate that doing The Woodsman as an actor allowed me to shoot a pilot and like get a bit more acting in that I don't really get to do that often. Because every time I do that show, people tend to want to meet me and go, "What are you? Why are you like
They're
this?"
confused.
Yeah. Going like, so you're a puppet act. What are you? So that has been really useful, and I'm grateful for that. But I've been able to sort of act a bit in that capacity and work on camera in some of those ways, which is a completely different muscle. And you live in LA; it's a different universe there.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's completely bonkers, and something that like I don't know a lot about, but I'm very excited to learn. And especially if I'm making something for on camera, it's really exciting to kind of go,
I mean,
okay, what's the subtle version?
I wanted to ask you about the film, because I wanted to ask you about CGI, like so many things back in the days. Everything was done with prosthetics, makeup. I mean, you see Star Wars, for example, and that's now it all changed. So I would just see your point of view on that. Like, where do you see going, like the prosthetics and everything? If you know, like, if you think that it's important to keep that part.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've kind of gotten to a point, I think every audience that sees like a big budget summer movie or anything in a movie theater that's usually a big budget blockbuster, we've gotten to the point where we can tell that it's a CGI effect. Like even if it's spectacular, we still go like, and the worst thing is that even when someone's doing on-camera effects, like they're doing prosthetics and this and that, sometimes we still think it's CGI because we're trained to believe that everything we're seeing is fake. What's exciting is that I actually think we're in a place where, when possible, people are trying to do it practically. I know that J.J. Abrams, when he did all of the latter Star Wars movies, those are almost entirely on camera aliens. The people are wearing robot costumes, and I think in Force Awakens, there's a lot more like Jim Henson style puppetry, where it's like there's 3 people inside of a thing, and it's fake skin, and they're pretending to be a 5-legged alien. It's like great. It's really simple. And I think we like that. And I can't speak to the world of cinema, but I think it's also really great for the filmmakers too, because you have something real to photograph. You're not like guessing where the camera needs to go. So I think it's like anything. I think it's a medium that should be used when it serves the story best. Um, like talking about design stuff, it's the same idea. It's like what's the thing that works for this idea. But yeah, I hope so. I think it's really satisfying, and in a weird way, we're allowed to believe it more.
Yeah.
If
Well,
it's
and
on
for the
camera.
actors too, like, you see pictures
Oh
on
my
set,
gosh.
the actors, and it's all green screen and everybody's wearing the dots, and
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
how? It's so
I
much better
know.
to
It's
just
really
have it.
hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I
my
think
next
so.
question for you is, if someone wanted
Okay.
to start doing what you do, puppets and all that, is there a school for that? Like, how do you start?
There's a lot of different avenues. I mean, I'm a little unusual because I'm pretty self-taught.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I, as we mentioned, love research. So I sort of found my way in that way.
Yep.
But there definitely are a couple schools. There's the University of Connecticut. That is, I believe it still offers this incredible puppetry program. I have a friend who has his MFA in puppetry,
Oh,
and
wow.
for that reason, from that school. And that's the one that pings to me right now. But generally, a lot of puppet companies, and especially many in the UK, they offer a lot of classes and workshops for people that are interested.
Okay.
I can't encourage actors, especially young actors that are working in New York, probably in LA too. And that's a world that I haven't spent too much time in, so I can't
Right.
speak to it too much. But I can't encourage young actors to not take a physical theater class that are intensive, and also maybe spend some time with puppetry.
Yeah.
Because I even think the way that theater was moving was that we're really interested in these sort of big genre stories on stage. We're not afraid of that anymore.
Yeah.
And we're trying to find a way to make it belong, which means there's always going to be puppeteers. Which, I mean, we did King Kong on Broadway. I mean, that's we kind of want these lavish, explosive things, and oftentimes a lot of productions are trying to cast dancers for puppetry, which I think is awesome. I think movement training really is even more useful, because you can start from a place of acting. Because, by the way, learning how to puppeteer is, I say this from this perspective, of course, it's not that complicated, because basically once you figure out how the machine works, how the device, this trigger does that, this handle does that, then you've learned it. The rest is sort of going, I am an actor, I am playing this character, and I happen to be connected to 3 other performers. How do we work together? The thing I love about puppetry is that it is like the microcosm of what making theater and art is, because you can never make it by yourself. There's not a version of that ever works. You're always working in tandem with other people, and you actually are having to breathe the same air as them when it's safe to do so. But I think that's why I think I'm so drawn to it, because it is all of those things. Wow, I have no idea what your question was anymore. I hope I answered.
No, it was about like how to start doing that. But
yes, right.
Yeah. I mean,
great.
Even if you don't want to do puppeteer, like if you want to do that professionally as an actor, is what you're saying. It can give you a lot of things to work on, like movement and the breath work, working in collaboration.
And I mean, absolutely. I mean, also, like, you can. The second I started finding my way through puppetry, it affected how I perform and how I act in a really great way. It's certainly, a lot of the work that is physical theater has to do with, like, how can you connect to an elemental idea? How can this character breathe like fire? How can this character walk like water? And all of that is so useful, because you want an arsenal underneath you, because sometimes the feeling is not going to be there. But if you just go like, oh, I think I'm a poodle, sometimes that's going to, like, save you when you're struggling, especially if you're on set and you have no time and you just met your co-actor. It's like sometimes you just need a thing. Hook.
I'm definitely a big advocate of physical acting. That's what I use the most.
Great.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. I love that.
I mean,
helps.
yes, you need to do the research and understand the psychology, but in the end, it's what you're saying, the physical, and it's also safer.
Yes.
Because sometimes the psychological part gets, too much for actors, or it gets too safe. So,
it can be hairy. Well, I mean, the fact of just dropping into your body forces you to stop judging and thinking.
Yeah.
And why not? Get out of there. It's not going to help. Sometimes it's just not going to help.
Yeah. So what specifics do you think that Puppeteer and all this work helped you with your acting? Because you just said it really changed it.
Yeah. I will say, I don't know if you've spent much time with like Shakespeare or spent much time like doing Shakespeare. Yeah, I love Shakespeare. I think like one of the first like real productions I ever was in a production of Twelfth Night, and it was the first time I think I was 19 or 20, and it was the first time I had to like dissect Shakespeare and dissect this language, and the game of going, how do I make this sentence make as much sense as me talking to you right now? Yeah. It's just like, how do you do it? Where's and learning the rules of the thing. It's a lot like puppetry, where like you learn the triggers, you learn the things, you learn the mechanics, so that you can then go, okay, great. So the end of the line is there. Where are the thoughts? And I actually think puppetry, in a very similar way, because the second you do Shakespeare, it affects the rest of the way that you approach any sort of text. Even when you're doing Mammoth, you're looking for the line ending. You're looking for the where's the spondy, where's the trochee, where's the double stress, where's all that other stuff that you can kind of dissect and then let it go. For puppetry, I was in acting school for a long time, and I definitely took physical theater classes, but I think I had decided that I was bad at it. I think I had told myself that I was like, this is not something I'm good at. I'm a brainiac and I'm a dork and I can't do it. I'm a Ravenclaw and I can't ever be anything else. And then coincidentally, I started doing this puppet work and making a lot of my own work. And weirdly enough, everything I was gravitating towards was the physical theater that I told myself I was bad at. So from that point on, everything starts from learning about puppetry and investing in puppetry on. Everything has started from, I wouldn't say an outside in completely, but starting from the physical life, starting from like, how do they hold their feet? Where are they the most grounded? I mean, it's all these sort of silly things that you're sort of, there's that worksheet that you fill out in acting school. It's like, what texture is your character? And you're like, yeah, some of that can be it's peach fuzz. Like you try to figure it out. But sometimes starting from that place and going, they emotionally interact with the world this way. So that must mean that they physically respond to other people this way. Say the lines, do the lines. You have to do the talking part too.
Yeah.
But there's something really powerful about, and even when I direct now and it has nothing to do with puppetry, I do try to get the show to a place where people can cover their ears and still know what's going on.
Yeah.
Because it's the thing I took from acting school that I use like every day when I'm developing something is, but what does the character want? And we do all that Stanislavski work inside of puppetry. We go, yeah. There's three of us. What's the verb that this character is trying to get from the other person right now?
Yeah.
To cut, to stab, to whatever. And that's the most, like, I do find that when I'm spiraling and I don't know how to approach this character, or like rehearsal's going to be in 5 minutes and I'm not ready for this thing, I do definitely, I've done whole shows actually. I did in college, this is a long time ago, but in college I was in The Last Days of Judas Iscariot, Stephen Adly Gurgis, this great play.
Yes.
It's a great play. And I was one of the lawyers, and I was on stage the whole time, and it was really daunting. And I had all this business papers and lawyery stuff in front of me. And I just realized that like the best way for my brain to be able to be playful was to, every time that I had to interview somebody on the stand, I just wrote a list of verbs that I could play at them that day. So literally I'd be going through before, like on stage in the scene, and going like, to accuse, and just like try the thing out.
Yes.
Because if you have something to do, again, physical, if you're doing something, then you're not worrying, and it doesn't go somewhere else that isn't helpful.
No, that's such great advice. Yeah. If you're stuck, I do that too. Then I'll write a verb, like for every
Yeah.
single line. I have
I
the
think it's
book
useful.
actions, and I'll just go, okay,
Yeah.
I'm running out of words. Like you
Yeah.
need a different
Oh
one
yeah.
for every line. Yeah.
I know
So
that.
useful.
What's helped me is actually breaking the scene into beats and putting one verb per beat,
Mm.
because then you have the flow. It's sort of like a gust of, this is so
Like a
specific, but it feels
storyline.
like it's like this, it flows to the next beat until
Uh-huh.
the scene changes. And that, it's very basic, but it's saved my life on
Yeah, but
several
even an
occasions.
action that's like super similar, even if you find another
Hmm.
word that might be a synonym, maybe that
Yes.
resonates different
Yes.
with you. And it makes such a
100%.
difference. Yeah. And I love what
Yeah.
you said
I mean, I'm
about not, if people cover their ears, you can still hear it, because my
yeah.
family, well, I'm from Spain and my family doesn't speak
Yes.
English. And they came to see
Yeah.
my shows in New York and everything. And they had no idea what we were saying, but
Wow.
they loved it. And it's what you're saying. If you
Cool.
can do that, people who don't
Yeah.
understand the language, if you don't hear it and still touch them, like,
Yeah.
that's it. You did it right.
I think so. I think that's important. I think
Yeah.
that's actually what was really cool about The Woodsman, is that it accidentally was a silent show.
Yeah.
And then we had this opportunity to like play to so many different groups of people that like this was not their language.
Yeah.
And it was really cool looking at, because some theater postcards do the thing where they put the flag of whatever language the show is in.
Oh, really? Okay.
And the fact that we had every flag at the bottom of it was really cool.
Notice.
And it really felt, yeah, it was really powerful, and kind of going like, cool, this is special. I feel like we're doing something here. So
that's so cool. Okay, so where can listeners find you and your work? And do you have something coming up?
yeah, I mean, well, I'm on Instagram as at Jortface, JORTFACE, and I'm mostly just posting strange nonsense, but mostly the things that I'm making and things that I'm building and projects that I might be working on. Oftentimes I'm not allowed to sort of share what I'm working on until like well after the fact. So oftentimes it's like, surprise, I worked on the show so many years later.
Right.
Before quarantine started, I was actually just about to leave town to direct Candide in Milwaukee, and I was so excited about it. Love that show.
That's so cool.
Beautiful musical. It's also strange because I went to school for like acting, no singing, acting, normal acting. Mm-hmm. And after graduating and after like being in this industry and making The Woodsman and making things like it, I've been offered opportunities to direct opera and direct musicals. And it says a lot about like how you have no idea what your career is going to be.
That's so funny. I keep hearing that. So many actors that are just thrown into musicals and they're like, I'm not a musical theater person. Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. But I also think that's why you're being asked, because there's sort of like, you have a wildly different perspective, and that's probably what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. So anyway, but yeah, just kind of, I was going to work on that, and I am somewhat working on a few things right now for other people that I don't know if I can talk about, but it's been fun, and it's been nice that things are opening up safely and carefully, and we're slowly trying to figure out how audiences can see work. And that's sort of the big question. And I think a lot of groups and a lot of people are putting their brain together and doing asking those questions and answering them in the right way.
Yeah. I mean, we're artists, we're creatives. We'll find a way to share it. For sure.
I think that's true. Yeah. I think that's completely true.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh my God, Denise, this was so fun. Thanks for asking me to be part of this.
I hope you guys learned so much as I did with James, because I had never even thought about the many things that go into puppeteering and the makeup he does and all the things he was talking about. It's just incredible. And I'm so grateful that he could come to the podcast and talk about it and give this advice. Actors, if you've never tried to do puppet work, go for it. Now that's the opportunity. He gave some resources. Go online and maybe you can learn and do it. Try makeup, try special effects, prosthetics. Now it's the time. We're all at home. It's quarantine, so let's learn a new skill. The thing that I took away the most with James, though, is that he is such a bright person. He has such a bright personality. He's funny. He is humble, too. And he's just such a nice person to talk to and to be around with. And that's something that we love, right? As an artist or as an actor, that's someone we want to work with. So thank you, James, for sharing your beautiful, beautiful personality, energy, and knowledge with us. And before we end this week's episode, I want to introduce the play of the week. And this week I'm bringing a classic. I know you've heard about it for sure. I'm bringing Cyrano de Bergerac by Edmond Rostand. And I'm just bringing it because it's one of my favorite plays. And the other day I was talking about it to one of my friends and we were like, oh, Cyrano is so good. I was like, even if you've read it, you can read it again. And if you haven't watched the movie, the one with Gerard Depardieu, it's so good. You have to watch it. And there are definitely many monologues that you can use, especially for college auditioning. And if you haven't read it, you have to. What are you waiting for? It's a classic French play in verse, kind of like Shakespeare, Moliere, those times. So you definitely can add it to your classic monologue. And this will be all for this week. Next week, we don't have a guest. And I'm not gonna say why, but it's for a special reason. But the next weeks, we have very exciting guests, actually many, and you won't hear from me for a while. We won't have our solo time other than these intros and outros, so I'll definitely miss you, but we'll get to it next week. So just a reminder that Sunday Spotlight submissions are open, or you can nominate someone. You can always DM me, but the submissions are open on the website or on the link in bio on Instagram. And if you don't follow The Actors Vow on social media, you can follow at The Actors Vow on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Also, you know the drill. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and leave a review. It's very, 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 very helpful for the podcast. You guys are the best. Have an amazing rest of the week, and I will see you next Wednesday.